Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Talking Tuesday. So it's a Talking Wednesday night here at GC. He's intern Joe. I'm Mike Yuva. We keep the football talk rolling. I know that the baseball team's playing absolutely out of their minds. You can check out the new show that we have on Sundays, Extra Innings. Colin Taylor does a tremendous job with that. And basketball, hard foul. Colin and intern Joe, they do that.
Yeah. Colin and I got a little something in the works for baseball season too. We are working on a little something with that. So stay tuned. Obviously.
So we got a lot right now with basketball going on. A late game tonight on ESPN2 with the men's team. So we will kind of give you guys a little something else to talk about before that, if you're going to watch that. 17.5 point underdogs. No one really giving South Carolina a chance on the court tonight. They're still looking for their first home SEC win on the season. But again, turning the attention back to football, as we all know, spring football is right around the corner. It's crazy, intern Joe, to just think about that. It feels like it was just yesterday that this team was down in Jacksonville, getting ready for the Gator Bowl, and that momentum that they had created to end the regular season. To me, that feels like it was just, honestly, a couple weeks ago. That was months ago. So I bring all that up because just like we saw, and again, I understand not winning the bowl game, it's a little bit different, but because of what South Carolina was able to do at the end of the regular season, on top of what they were able to do from a recruiting standpoint, the momentum's still very, very strong. You look back to that Duke's Mayo Bowl season, and they won that. That momentum was massive. And all off season, the expectations, right? Rattler's coming in and this and that. Well, Rattler's back. Juice Wells is back. You have some talented pieces on both offense and defense. Certainly there's some question marks too, intern Joe. When you would, in terms of measuring it in comparison to last year, where would you say expectations are? Not necessarily from a win-loss standpoint, but just the expectations. How much has it gone up in comparison to a year ago when we were at this point?
Yeah, I mean, obviously expectations are going to rise when you beat two of the top 5 teams in back-to-back weeks and have such a splash in recruiting like they have with Nicholas Harbor, and then you have your 2 weapons coming back, Spencer and Juice. Then you also get a fresh look at the offense with Dowell Loggins. And with that, obviously, expectations rise a little bit too, because we saw how, little offensive production that, the Gamecocks saw with Marcus Satterfield under the helm in the weeks leading up to the 2 big wins. And so obviously with Dowell coming in, it gives you a lot of hope because, it's a fresh system. It's brand new for everybody and, gives Dowell the chance to design a playbook around Spencer and Juice and then Nicholas Harbor and stuff like that. And I mean, Shane has said it too, that, Dowell's already working on some stuff to, a Nicholas Harbor package, if you will, and having him come in with, and also too, I think it is a benefit, Mike, and having your transfer class pretty much already settled, right? Everything is all signed, sealed, and delivered. So I think it's a very big benefit to have that because then, I mean, Dowell's already gone to work on the offense, and they already have a kind of a picture of what it looks like. But anyways, naturally, expectations are going to rise. You take a national brand like Notre Dame that deep into the Gator Bowl. Obviously, it was a big season for South Carolina. It didn't go as hoped, but I mean, it did. It was an improvement from the year before, and that's all you want to see. But down year for Notre Dame and whatnot. But to take a national brand like that to the wire and a very exciting game that a lot of people watched, expectations are going to be a little bit higher. But I'm not saying I think there's expectations to win the SEC East, which is good because I think those expectations. I'm sure some people in their own right minds have that expectation, but most people are not expecting South Carolina to win the SEC East, which is nice. But I think I guess the ceiling is a roof for this team, really. If you want to quote MJ there, there's a lot of potential with this team. And I think that's what we're kind of looking at expectation wise. It could go either way, right? It just depends on how they perform.
You mentioned Dowell Loggins, and as I've told people before, give this man an opportunity before we start worrying, okay, look what his resume was, right, in the NFL. you know, he can't have success here. I think he has won some people over since he arrived at South Carolina because of everything we've heard so far from a recruiting standpoint, right? But again, as I've said many, many times before, what he does ultimately on Saturdays as an OC, that is what he'll be judged by, right? So I bring that up because we understand the resume that he had from an NFL standpoint. And like I've told people before, a lot of those situations that he was in, right? You talk about the Cleveland Browns, you talk about the Chicago Bears, they weren't great situations. They weren't great situations, okay? And you look across the board, in the NFL, that happens all the time. I want to read a blind resume to you real quick, intern, and for everyone that is out there, okay? Just read a quick resume, okay? And I'll try. I mean, look, I know some people don't follow the NFL super, super close, but I think when you hear some of these names for teams, I think you'll be able to put, you'll be like, all right, I understand what you're trying to say. You have LSU. Then you go to Jacksonville Jaguars. Okay. 2007 to 2010, wide receivers coach. Okay. Hopped around a little bit, back in the NFL as the offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2016 to 2017. Offensive coordinator for the Bucs in 2018. Offensive coordinator for the Cleveland Browns in 2019. So I say all that, right? I say all that. Do you see the similar pattern in terms of like when you try to talk about Dal Loggins? And I'm not saying this is exactly how it's going to play out at South Carolina. That resume I just read is the resume of former Georgia offensive coordinator, now current Baltimore Ravens OC, Todd Monken. So I bring that up because, again, I'm not saying that what Dal Loggins is going to do at South Carolina is going to be able to replicate what we saw over the last couple of years with Georgia. My whole point being is this. Don't just look at what someone did at a totally freaking different level and just assume, oh, here we go again. Yeah, he's not going to be able to have success. Freaking wait. Give him a freaking chance. Because, again, if that was the case with Todd Monken, why hire him? Why hire him? Yeah, he had experience, a little bit different situation than Dal. No question, right? He was a head coach. I think it was at Southern Miss. Hits him up. But let's not act like, okay, because of XYZ in the NFL as an offensive coordinator, you're not going to have success in college. I just think that's absolutely foolish to think of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Dowell, like going into this, right? The hire, everybody remembers all of the noise surrounding the hire and how South Carolina fans were upset. It's like, who the hell is this guy? He wasn't a big name and all of that stuff. And right. And so I think you do need to give him a chance. But I think right now, Dowell is certainly building trust already with what he's done on the recruiting trail, right? Harbor has said, I believe he has said that, Loggins made a big push in his and made a big impact in his recruitment as well. I know he definitely won over the commitment of Mazio Bennett. I know because Mazio has talked about that and how much Loggins is invested in these guys. And I mean, being in the NFL that long, there were concerns on if he was going to be able to recruit, right? And so those questions were answered as soon as he got here, right? So those the big questions surrounding recruiting and, a lifelong NFL guy. Recently, he was at Arkansas, so he does know how to recruit, and he got Trey Knox to come over, and that proves that. But the biggest question, arguably, will be the play calling. And I think, right, Mike, you talked about it with his recent stops and how they were unsuccessful and whatnot. There's going to be a whole lot of doubters going into game one. And I think even continuing into game 2 and 3 and whatnot, we saw it with Satterfield, right? There are going to be doubters in the play calling. There always needs to be somebody to point the finger at. And sometimes it's just the offensive coordinator when things aren't clicking, or the offensive line too. But I mean, I think Dowell has a really good chance, especially the week 1 game, man. The week 1 against North Carolina is going to be a very, very good game. Neutral site. You're playing against a pretty decent UNC defense. It's returning a decent amount of guys. So I think that's your biggest test. And you have, weapons galore with Harbor coming in. Harbor will be there established. He'll be through summer camp. He'll be through fall camp. And so I think it's going to be really, really, really fun to watch to see what kind of offense he rolls out there. And granted, we already have kind of a picture, right? The pro style running gun. And, we know he's designing it around his weapons. And we know Spencer's a little bit more of a mobile kind of quarterback. And so I think week one, he's got, a lot of expectations going into it. It's like, what will it be? A lot of questions, a lot of doubters. And I think it's a great chance because it's going to be on national TV. It's against, a newer rival in UNC and neutral site game. A lot of people paying attention to it, a lot of star power. Spencer Rattler, Drake May. I think you're going to see a lot of scoring in that one. But I think it's a really good opportunity for Dowell to prove a lot of the doubters wrong.
No, I do too. And look, as I've mentioned before, there's going to be, just like there is every year, but there's going to be some questions with this offense surrounding the offensive line. And it's such a crucial part. I understand there's guys coming back. Okay. The starters are gone, but this unit hasn't worked with each other before. And it's so vital to make sure these guys are on the same page. So again, how quickly can they develop that rapport? We can go through spring football. They can be able to get acclimated to the playbook, and that's fantastic, right? I mean, every other freaking team in the country that's going through some type of coaching change, some type of OC change, they're in the same boat, all right? But once you hit that field and you have those weapons and you have the quarterback back, that's great. But how is it going to look like up front? How's it going to look? For the last 2 seasons, South Carolina went with a zone blocking scheme. And that's not to say that in years past they didn't have some zone blocking concepts in it. I mean, every team does a combination of the two to some degree. But they were so heavy on zone blocking that it really screwed everything up. And I don't know if it was, and again, this was because of the offensive style, the offensive philosophy that Marcus Satterfield had when he was at South Carolina, that they wanted to be able to implement this offensive style. And we saw how much the offensive line struggled that first season. Yeah. And I felt like in year 2, it was a combination of a bunch of things, right? It was the offense trying to figure out who the hell they were going to be. Rattler trying to get comfortable with his new teammates, developing the timing, everything around him, but not just timing in terms of throwing the ball to a receiver or tight end or whoever the case, right? Running back out of the backfield, timing in terms of when to step up in the pocket, having that trust with that offensive line, an offensive line that, again, it was new for him because he had played at a freaking totally different team. So now he has to learn a new playbook. I think the concepts, because he's going from one offensive style to another, I think a lot of the concepts will be similar, right? And I don't want people to misconstrue that and think like, oh, goodness, the playbook's going to look the exact same. No. I'm talking, a lot of the terminology, right? It might be called something different, but the idea is still there, right? I mean, you go into different offensives, right? You go run and shoot or wherever the heck it is. There's going to be a lot of concepts that are going to be the same. The terminology is just going to be a little bit different. So I think that's the big thing. It's, again, spring football is great. You'll be able to start building a foundation in turn, Joe. But once you get to the fall, that's when we're going to figure out what the hell this offense is going to look like. That's when we're going to figure out what this offensive line in particular is going to look like, because now it's not just going up against the same guys that you go every day against in those 15 practices. All right. Now it's going up against guys that have been scheming against you. And other than watching some film and maybe, all right, the last couple of years, if you had an opportunity, especially with SEC play, Georgia's that third game, you have some type of experience playing them. So maybe you understand some tendencies, but at the end of the day, you have to go out there and you just got to execute. How quickly can this offense get on the same page? And it comes down to really, in my opinion, that offensive line.
Yeah, Mike. And I mean, it's always been the question mark, right? I mean, going into this offseason because you lost guys, veteran starters, quite like Eric Douglas, Jovan Gwynn. I mean, those guys are absolutely crucial to your O line. And there's a couple guys I'm forgetting, but sorry to those guys. But anyways, you just those guys have once they broke into the starting lineup, they have stayed there for their entire careers. Jovan Gwynn, I believe he played in 42 something games and played in 46 and started 42 of them and never looked back. I mean, it's ridiculous. And so to go about replacing the veteran guys like that, it's going to be a big task. And obviously, it's a really big ask, especially for that group, to kind of have everything together and ready to go with the schedule being as it is. So front loaded, it's like, okay, here we go. It's like time to go, time to perform and stuff like that. And so it's going to be really, really, really interesting and to see how they can get it together. And it's going to be, I guess, fun for us and not so fun for them to try to, figure it out. And I mean, Mike, we've talked about it at length too. The offensive line needs to be a really cohesive group. So now in spring ball, you return or you bring in a guy like Nick Gargiulo, somebody that's been there before, not necessarily an SEC play, but he was one of the lone captains at Yale. One of, they're not over 100 captains in their 100 years of football. I know that. And so a veteran guy like that who understands, he's coming in at center, which is very key, I think, in terms of his role. For him to be a veteran leader on this offensive line, you'd like it to be your center.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's key. And to bring him in, he's going to be the foundation of this O-line. And I think that was the whole point of bringing a veteran guy like that in, because now you can build around him, right? And you have a couple returners. You've got a couple recruits. You've got Big Tree, obviously. We'll see if he plays. He could very well play. I mean, there's a good chance. Who knows, really, other than Gargiulo right now. And there's, I think Dylan Wanham, I believe, is another returner as well. But the offensive line is wide open. And that's going to be really fun to see during spring ball, who kind of steps in, who kind of steps up. Because, again, it's a wide open race. And I think it's going to be really challenging for them, at least, with the front-loaded schedule to kind of get things on track, because it's something we've seen these South Carolina offensive lines and just offensive lines in general across the country struggle with. It's getting things on track from the jump. Like, it's football, right? It's college football. They don't get a preseason, right? Mm-hmm. They don't get the opportunity to see somebody else and kind of work those kinks out before game one. So it's going to be really interesting to see how well they can rebound, pick things up with as front-loaded as their schedule is.
And I know I mentioned this before. I actually wrote an article back in January on this, what will determine South Carolina's offense success in 2023. And as I mentioned before, I truly believe a lot of it's going to have to do with the offensive line. I truly do. And look, the last season or so, I guess you could say really 2 seasons, but, year plus at least. The offensive line, the criticism it got at times, was it just? Yes, at times, yes. Yeah. But I also felt like it was the easy scapegoat. Oh, yeah. There were times where, again, when you're doing zone blocking, if the quarterback's not identifying the Mike linebacker pre-snap or a running back's not picking up a block on the edge, it's so easy to be like, oh, it's the offensive line, right? Oh, sack. Oh, Rattler had to step up, throw it away. It's so easy to do that. There's so much more to it. That's why, and I'm trying to remember the exact statistic, I think it was 14, heading into this season, when Satterfield said from the previous year, I think he said 14 or 12 of the sacks were really on the offensive line. And the rest were just on for what, quarterback, running back, tight end, missed a blocking assignment. So I bring those things up because that's not what I'm necessarily talking about when I'm saying about the concerns. And again, going back to this piece that I wrote, I threw out the statistic back in January. So based on the guys that they're losing, okay? Based on some of the guys that they're losing, Eric Douglas, 13 starts, okay? 13 starts. Jovan Gwynn, 13 starts. Dylan Wanham, 10 starts. Okay. Key Moore, 8 starts. Vershawn Lee, 7 starts. Jalen Nichols, 7 starts. Tyshawn Wanamaker, 4 starts. Trey Jones, 2 starts. Wyatt Campbell, 1 start. And I did all this math. You add it up. It's not too crazy. But if you add all those starts up, you get 65, right? 13 games times the 5 offensive lineman positions. Of that 65, USC is losing Douglas, Gwen, and Wanham. Or in other words, more than 50% of the starts from their offensive line in 2022. In addition, Campbell has not publicly said whether or not he'll be using his extra year of eligibility. I think that has been updated. But my whole point being, intern Joe, is that you have guys, right? You have guys that have played on this offensive line. You have guys that have started on the offensive line. Of course, the playbook's going to look different, okay? But it's more so just being in sync. And that's one position that it just doesn't happen overnight. So, again, will they go back to a man blocking scheme? I'm not going to be shocked by that. I think what they're going to do, they're going to do whatever they can to be able to get these guys in sync as quickly as possible. And I know I probably sound like an absolute broken record by saying that, like, getting in sync. We'll have to see. But it's the God's honest truth. It's the God's honest truth. We can sit here and talk about, Rattler, he's being snubbed for some of these lists, and, Wells. Again, it doesn't freaking matter who the quarterback is. It doesn't matter who the hell the receivers are. You have to be able to give these guys time. I think there will be an improvement. Will there be a learning curve? Will there be a period of time where this offense might not be clicking the way that it could be by the time in the middle of the season at the end? Absolutely. No question about it. And I kind of expect that to happen. But again, you're not playing TikTok Tech week 1. No. You're playing a Power 5 team. A Power 5 team who the last time you played in that stadium, you freaking embarrassed. Essentially in their backyard. So now you're going back up there again. They're going to be ready to go. How ready is that offensive line going to be? That's the question. And we're not going to know. Spring football, there'll be a lot of things that we always do, right? Right? We'll watch something. Someone will do something. Maybe they'll have a couple runs. And, oh, my goodness. Wow, this is great. Offensive line could look great in the spring. How much of that do you put stock in terms of trying to figure out what we should expect week 1?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like it's gonna be the biggest question, arguably, because I mean, you return a guy like Spencer, you return a guy like Juice, and you've got weapons such as Nick Harbor. When we've all seen, what he can do speed wise, it's gonna be really, really fun to see what he can do offensively and what Loggins can do there. Mike, another position that I'm really interested to see which way they go, especially in the spring, is at linebacker. There are a lot of good options at linebacker. Mm-hmm. And also on the defensive line. Defensive line is one area of concern. At linebacker's one, it's just kind of fun to put together some combinations. You've got Blinn, you've got Pup Howard, you've got Mo Kaba, you've got Debo Williams coming back. It's going to be really, really, really fun to see what they do at linebacker because they have a lot of talent there. A lot of young talent too, especially with like I said, Blanton played a lot last year as a true freshman, so he's bringing back some experience. Mo Cobb is your guy in the middle, and then Debo Williams is just about as experienced as anybody on the roster. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the defensive line, you're losing a guy like Zach Pickens. You lost a guy like Jordan Birch. You're returning Tonka Hemingway, he had some of the best PFF numbers on the squad last year, not just offensively either, which we saw what a weapon he is offensively. But I mean, defensive line wise, Jordan Strawn was granted his extra year of eligibility. So that's going to be interesting. I would assume he would step up into that, number 1 defensive end role, but who's going to play on the other side? That's a good question. A lot of different combos there. And I mean, Jordan Strawn's game is really, really, really good when he's on, right? I think, the length that he has, I mean, they call him freaking stretch for God's sakes. Like the length that he has is some of the best in the SEC. So if he can really get it going and really rebound from this injury, I think, he's going to be, the anchor on that defensive line. And obviously he and Tonka, Boogie Huntley as well at tackle is going to be interesting. Boogie's made some big strides in the last couple of years. So Tonka and Boogie's going to be really good, really fun to watch. But I mean, you have Stretch on the other end. But I don't know, Mike, what do you think, or what are you looking at spring ball to see what they do with the defensive line, and then I guess the linebackers too?
I think, look, as we've mentioned before in the past, I don't care who the hell you have in the secondary. If you don't put pressure up front,
Yeah.
I mean, shoot, you could put. I always go back with the old school names sometimes, like Dick Lane, right? Night Train Lane. But I mean, you could go Coach Prime, right? You can throw Deion Sanders out there. You can throw DJ Swearinger, J.C. Horn back there. R.I.P. Sean Taylor. I mean, you could throw whoever the hell you want in that secondary. You have to be able to put pressure on. You have to put pressure on. So, again, and it brings up a question about, who can we expect to see if outside of Strawn. I think, look, when you look at what South Carolina has been able to do from an edge standpoint, over the last couple of years, they've been able to produce some really talented guys. Obviously, losing a guy like Edmonds this offseason to the portal to Florida State, that sucked, because that was one of the guys that you were expecting to be able to, assume that number one role. So again, there's going to be question marks as to, number one, who can be that guy that you can count on, right? To be able to play the majority of the snaps, number one. But number two, especially at a position like that, you need depth. Yep. And I know someone was asking before about the 3 football players. It sucks right now with the whole Monty Rame situation, because I was very excited to see him perform this spring. And, there's no further information about it right now. I will say this, though, because they're not the same situation by any means. But I did see a comment earlier today, and I think it was on the forum, could have been on Twitter, but it was comparing the situation of what's going on at Alabama. That is a very, 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 very tragic and sad situation. Okay. It's a sad situation. In terms of that player being able to play tonight, I don't think you can compare the two. I don't think you can compare to the two. And it goes back to the old saying, right? 2 rights don't make a wrong. So again, there's going to be legal stuff that come. I mean, I'm not even going to go there. Okay. The comments that Nate Oates said, that's a different story. And I'm not going to really dissect everything that he said, because at the end of the day, we're not covering Alabama. But I bring that up just because the whole point being is you can't look at that situation and be like, well, look what happened there. Bottom line is we know what the rules are at South Carolina. Okay. Whether you agree with them or you disagree with them. If he is able to come back, all right, and I don't know how it's all going to play out, and we understand too, regardless of your stance on guns and this and that, I know we're in a state that is very big on them. I'm not here to tell you how to feel about guns. That's not my job. But I will say this, though. We're living in a society right now where obviously there's a lot going on with guns too, right? I mean, we see stuff every day in the news. So, I think it would be naive to dismiss that I'm sure that will be something that is, also in the thought process just because of the society. But again, that's not my place to lecture people on guns. That's not what I'm trying to do. If he is able to come back, though, intern Joe, I'm interested to see the growth. I'm not talking about from a maturity standpoint. I'm not talking about from just being a boy to be turning into a young man. I'm talking about the growth in terms of a football player. I had the chance to see him a little bit in high school. Long arms. He's freakishly athletic, good speed, good size. And I don't want to get so hung up talking about someone who might not even be here, but it's a damn shame because that was a guy I felt like could provide depth early on in his career. I really did. So again, not knowing what's going to play out with that situation, because I feel like if you have to look at the three, he's probably got the longest path or road back in terms of being able to get back on the team, and that's just an assumption. That's not a report. That's just an assumption. Since he had the gun, according to the alleged reports. So I just bring that up because, man, I was really looking forward to being able to see that young man out there this spring, and at least right now, it doesn't appear that's going to be the case.
Yeah. In terms of Montague, yeah, he's got to deal with his stuff. I know Peyton Williams squashed some of the rumors that he wasn't on campus and stuff like that with his Instagram post or his Instagram story post. I know what I'm talking about. I'm just exhausted, so excuse me for that. But yeah, Peyton Williams kind of squashed like the rumors that he was off campus or something like that. But obviously, Raines has the biggest hill to climb with all of that. And I mean, Mike, it's not even comparable to the tragedy that happened at Alabama. You know, one thing, I mean, granted, they both just, gun-related charges, but I mean, somebody's life was taken and stuff like that. And I mean, it's, not a good situation at all. And, again, we're not going to get into Nate Oates or Brandon Miller or anything like that. And I know the hecklers are out tonight and all of that, and rightfully so, should be. But I mean, yeah, entirely different situations. And, thankfully Montague was never in a situation to do something like that and all of that. So still has a hill to climb legally and with the school and whatnot. But yeah, totally different ball games. Can't really compare those.
I do want to hit one more thing before we head into a quick timeout. When we look at what South Carolina has done from a tight end standpoint, okay, obviously the depth that they have at that position, there's a lot of talented guys. I mean, shoot, I go back to the summer when Connor Cox committed, tight end from the Jacksonville area or around that Jacksonville area. There's been so many Florida commitments, I can't keep up with them anymore. But I say that because at that time I was like, well, they're getting a pretty good tight end. And now he's buried on the depth chart, it feels like. Again, at least from you look at some of the experience and some of the other talent guys that, they're all going to have an opportunity to come. My point being is it just goes to show how talented that room has become. And I bring that up not because it's an obvious statement, because there's a lot of people out there being like, yeah, no kidding. But I also think when you look at what South Carolina could be doing from an offensive standpoint, could be a lot of 2 tight end sets. Could be situations where there's 3 tight end sets, which in the NFL, it all depends which team you're following. I mean, the Patriots for years, especially when Aaron Hernandez was on the team. And, when you had Aaron Hernandez and Gronk out there, when you have the talent at tight end, okay, when you have that talent at tight end, and especially with just how that position has evolved, and we've talked about that in turn, Joe, on this program, the way that position has evolved, you don't necessarily have to worry about having, all these different type of wide receivers out there, because if you're doing 2 tight end sets, you have a running back out there. That's 3 guys right there. And that's not to say South Carolina does not have some talent at wide receiver. They have some talent. They have some guys too that we didn't even see last year, right? Think of Landon Sampson. Think of all the freaking buzz around that kid coming out of high school when he was coming out of Texas a year ago. Okay. Red shirts. He got a lot of good reps from everything that we were told from people close to the program. A lot of good reps throughout the course of the season, but a lot of good reps during bowl practices. So I bring that up because, again, I feel like, and we're going to have to see how quickly Harbor adapts to everything. I'm not going to be shocked if we see a lot of 2 tight end sets this year. I'm really not. And if that is the case, if there's two receivers out there, maybe there's a situation where there's only one. Maybe there's two running backs in the backfield. Could be two tight end sets, two running backs, 22 personnel. Who's going to be that wide receiver or two to really separate themselves? We know Juice Wells is there. Marion Brown, we know is there. Xavier Legette, right? We know that there's some talented guys that are coming back. DeCarrion Joyner, I feel like he's going to have a chip on his shoulder to go out there and prove something this season. And he's going to have extra motivation with his baby girl on the way soon. So, again, outside of Juice Wells, outside of, guys that you would just assume, all right, Marion Brown's, who's going to be that guy that steps up? Because if there's not as many opportunities to be out there on the field from a wide receiver standpoint, again, this is talking in hypotheticals, which I don't like necessarily to do, but I think you have to acknowledge it, that USC might have so much, USC has so much talent at tight end. If it becomes proven talent after the spring, and it gives both Dal Loggins and it also gives Beamer that comfortability factor of just like, hey, shoot, I can trust these guys out there. Who's that wide receiver that's going to step up? Who's that wide receiver that can be out there, that you will put out there in addition to those tight ends that we talked about? Because I think it's going to be a tight end heavy team next year. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, you need tight ends to have a successful offense, and I think Dowell's really going to use it. I would like to see him kind of stick it to his predecessor, if you will, because obviously Satterfield didn't use the tight ends well, and Dowell has talked about that he's going to use the tight ends. And now that you have a lot, it's kind of deep. I mean, you got a guy like Reed McKees, you got Connor Cox, you got Trey Knox. It's going to do both now. Now that you have a guy like Harbor, I think those two, not interchangeable because their skill sets are a little different, but I think they're both kind of going to play the same role in terms of being a flex player for the offense, just being like, wide receiver.
Lewis, that's a good one. Eddie Lewis is another good one. I think I also think that's a guy that can make an impact on special teams with his speed. But continue, intern Joe.
Yeah, no, so I think, you're going to need your tight ends to block, especially, to give Spencer the protection that he needs to succeed in this offense. And I think they do it a lot in the NFL, two tight end sets, stuff like that.
Yep.
You see a lot of backup tight ends. You see a lot of funky stuff with that. So I expect to see all that and more. You have a diverse group of tight ends. You have guys that are more than willing and capable to block. And you have guys that can go out and just flat out make plays like wide receivers.
And guys that want to block too. Guys that want to block. I mean,
that's what I'm saying.
We don't know necessarily who's going to be the starters in that group. I mean, you have kind of like an idea when you look like I'm not going to sit here and say, all right, Nicholas Harbor is going to be a day one starter. I think as talented as he is and as good as he can be, I think it's a little premature just to assume, oh yeah, Nicholas Harbor is going to be, a day one starter. How quickly he's able to get adjusted to everything, acclimate, all that kind of stuff. But, I mean, again, you look at that room, intern Joe. You look at that freaking room. I mean, that's a talented room. So, and that's the other part of it, too. If this is Satterfield's offense, right? If we're heading into year 3 under Satterfield from an OC standpoint, you kind of have a better sense of how he uses the tight end position, right? If it was going to be 2 tight end sets, he liked using the tight ends a lot when it came to blocking, especially on the perimeter. A lot of screens, swing passes, all that kind of stuff. So, and no, Nate Atkins is not back. Nate Atkins, he's done. It was his last season this past year. So you're gonna have a new offensive coordinator who, again, figuring some guys out. We don't know what that will look like in terms of, okay, how does he want to use his tight ends? Will it be a lot more blocking with those guys? Will he use them more as pass catchers? To me, going back to what we were talking about before, intern Joe, before we hit some of these ads, to me, it comes down to what we were talking about with the offensive line, right? if they're getting their job done, now it gives you a little bit more breathing room as an offensive coordinator. Now you feel more comfortable. Now you don't feel like you have to leave a guy back home that added, quote unquote, 6 offensive linemen, potentially 7 if you have 2 tight ends out there, both blocking. Maybe you have a running back in the backfield that's blocked. Because think how much easier the game becomes, right? I mean, we talk about it all the time when it comes to defending the pass, right? If you know it's going to be pass, and you're not running the ball, right? You're not running the football. What happens? Well, a good defensive lineman, not even a good one, could be an average one, puts his freaking hand in the dirt, and he knows that he can just tee off. Pass rush, pass rush, pass rush, pass rush. They love that. They absolutely love it, right? Think about it from a baseball standpoint. You know it's just going to be fastball, fastball, fastball. You need to be able to throw a changeup. You need to be able to throw a curveball in there. So if South Carolina isn't able to get the type of protection that they need from the O-line, and they need the tight ends to stay at home, what happens? Well, you have fewer people going out for passes. See the comparison? Now it becomes easier to defend the pass.
Mm-hmm.
You have less options out there. So what's going to happen? They're going to send more guys. That was an issue for South Carolina for a while at times last season. It was certainly a problem for them 2 years ago. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. And I think if they're able to get over that, you're going to see the tight end position used more as a pass catcher than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I mean, like I said, I think he's going to use 2 tight ends. I think Dowell's going to use it creatively. I think it's going to be really, really fun to see.
Oh, I misread SC Scout Guy.
Yeah.
He's going to go through the process with Pro Day. He's going to be doing Pro Day. I believe that is March. Goodness. It's in a couple weeks, put it that way. The NFL Combine's coming up in a couple days out in Indy. 5 South Carolina players will be out there. We'll talk more about that next week. But Pro Day held at South Carolina, even more players will be taking part in that. Guys who weren't invited to Indy, guys who were invited to Indy, sometimes they'll do some of the stuff back here. It's comfortability standpoint, right? Being able to do some of those things. So we'll have to wait and see in terms of what Nate's future is going to be. I feel like with his impact on special teams, his ability to block, he showed off the hands. I mean, that Clemson catch, it's going to be kind of like the Clowney hit for years to come. You're going to go into bars. I mean, they're already seeing it down here, and you're seeing the catch, just posters just all over the place, newspaper, picture, just whatever. That picture is going to live on forever. I don't know this for certain. I have not asked him or his father, Greg, but I wouldn't be shocked if he wants to get into coaching because he'd be a hell of a coach. Because, again, playing that tight end position, you have a little bit of both when it comes to the knowledge of an offensive lineman, and you also have that knowledge as a receiver, right? It's kind of that hybrid position. The fact that he also comes from a coaching family, and his father is phenomenal when it comes to just the knowledge of the game. Unfortunately, the health issues kept him away at times, and now he'll be still working with the team, but in an off-field role. I think that tells you everything. I think it speaks volumes. Intern Joe, tax season, got to make sure you have all your forms, baby. And if you do, who should you call?
Should call our good friends over at Taxiety. Taxiety is that uncertain feeling you get right before
Liberty Tax.
Or Liberty Tax. Sorry, I'm tired.
You're already getting taxiety. That's how much
exactly. That's exactly how it goes. Sorry, I read the graphic. Forgot to call our friends over at Liberty Tax. But anyways, Taxiety is that uncertain feeling you get right before doing your taxes, but you don't have to go through it alone. The tax team at Liberty Tax in Irmo, Lexington, Columbia will walk you through the process, clear up any confusion, guarantee you'll get the biggest possible refund or your money back. It's tax time. If you're in a hurry for your refund, call the team at Liberty Tax. Fast, accurate, and guaranteed. On the other hand, if you think you might be owing Uncle Sam, talk to the Liberty Tax team to make sure you're not paying more than you should owe. They'll find every possible deduction for you. Locally owned and operated, staffed by tax professionals from your neighborhood. Open 9 to 9 on weekdays, 9 to 5 on Saturdays. with multiple service options. Start through the Liberty Tax mobile app or through the desktop portal. Make an appointment or just walk in, give a call to upload your tax documents. And when you come in, your return will be ready to review and sign. Give them a call over at 803-462-5576. Once again, that's 803-462-5576. And Mike, got another sponsor. Talk about our guy, Clint Hammond.
Yeah, Clint Hammond, we've talked about this many times, right? I mean, this time of the year, people are starting to look. They want to get a new home now, right? Some of those rates could be hopefully going in your favor. Clint Hammond will make it so freaking easy for you. He'll make it a hell of a lot easier for you. All you got to do is give him a call over at the Mortgage Network, 803-576-4450. He'll help you out just like he was able to help out former Gamecock quarterback Perry Orth. He's also been able to help out our own Wes Mitchell, good friend of his, through the mortgage process. So make sure you reach out to Clint over at the Mortgage Network. Clint Hammond has been a longtime supporter of Gamecock Central, as well as a longtime sponsor of GC Live. Intern Joe, I do want to bring up this, one thing I do want to throw out there, because I know some people see the suits when I do the tweet. There is another commitment on the way for South Carolina. As we do, we won't say who it is. We won't say the year. We won't say any of that. But there's another commitment on the way. And one thing I do want to point out, and I'm not necessarily talking directly about this individual. I'm talking in the broader sense about what South Carolina has been able to do from a recruiting standpoint. Because, again, this athlete, he'll be committing at some point. And I say athlete, people are going to think that's the position. What I've noticed, especially with the end of the 2023 period, we're seeing a lot of the class of 2024 guys, some 2025, I think too, but 2024 guys in particular. When South Carolina hired Shane Beamer in December, or what was that, 2020? As soon as he was able to assemble his coaching staff, they really, really, really got after it from a recruiting standpoint heavily for the class of 2024. I think that's also the case for 2025, but I think especially for 2024. I think they looked at that year as, hey, that's going to be our year. That's going to, for a lack of a better phrase, that's going to make or break us. Because one thing I've noticed with a lot of these freaking players, for the class of 2024, when I write up these stories on, Cam Pringle committed or, whoever, you can go down the list. One thing that keeps coming up is how South Carolina was either the first Power 5 school to reach out to that player, or they were one of the first. And I think that is something that should not be overlooked, right? One thing that we talk so much about with this coaching staff is how good they do from a recruiting standpoint, right? They're also identifying talent quickly, and they're not wasting time. You can't just go around just offering everybody right away. Okay, right? You can't just do that. But I truly believe they have this vision, and I would love to be able to sit down with Taylor Edwards. Maybe we can get him to come on the program at some point. The problem is you try not to, give the recipe away to the rest of the world, right? So you're walking a fine line. But I'm fascinated by how USC is thinking ahead, right? Because you have these boards, you have these whiteboards at South Carolina, just like a lot of these colleges have. And they kind of have their, if you will, 2, 3, 4, 5-year plan, right? And it's all up there. And you start having all the players' names and, where's he leaning? And they're able to kind of have a sense of, okay, what would the roster look like in the year of, 2024 if this player does come here? How many linebackers do we have? How many quarterbacks do we have? Like, that's something that you're constantly updating. And then obviously with the portal now, it makes it even more confusing. But I bring that up because they have their plan set. They're looking ahead. And they've done such a good freaking job of being early on some of these players that these guys are like, shoot, that loyalty means a lot to me. So when that happens, I think a lot of the time we look at it and the first thing we're saying is, wow, that's a big time commitment. Wow, here's another 4-star. Wow, could be a 5-star, whatever the case may be. What shouldn't be overlooked is how much that helps South Carolina moving forward. And what I mean by that is, again, obviously these are all verbal commitments until they put pen to paper. And for the class of 2024, that won't be able to happen until December of this year. But when you're able to do those things, intern Joe, think how much easier that makes things. Think how much easier that makes things. Because now it's like, shoot, we already have an idea. We already have an idea who's coming here. And a lot of the time now, and you're seeing it with South Carolina, you're seeing it at other schools, but this coaching staff, they're encouraging these players to commit early. 2 reasons. One, it helps them out in terms of identifying that whiteboard I was talking to you about. But number 2, they're able to go out there and start recruiting. They're able to be kind of like ambassadors of the program, like we've seen with Pop Howard, like we've seen with Dante Reno. I just think that that's something that just really stood out to me, is how they're doing a great job recruiting, but they're doing a freaking awesome job when it comes to identifying these players quickly. I mean, some of these players are freaking freshmen in 2020 when Shane Beam arrived here. And they found some of these, and they got right after, I should say 2021. They were freshmen, his first full season. They're making offers to some of these guys, or, maybe they're making an offer at the beginning of the year in 2021, or, maybe at the end of 2020, they're looking ahead, and some of those guys signed in this class of 2023. So I just bring that up because I just think it's another example of how good of a job they really are doing when it comes to recruiting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think SC Scout Guy's point, that comment that I was just about to bring up, I agree. I think that's the way to get it done. And especially, like, I'm currently working on an article. I talked to our good friend Dante Reno about what it's like to just kind of recruit guys, right? And how to show it's like a family and stuff. I think, when you get guys that, aren't necessarily 5 stars or, kind of doubted a little bit like that, those guys tend to recruit so much harder for you and stuff like that. And I think, the recruiting, I'm sorry, I was stuttering, but the recruiting ranking is it's only a number, right? You can only judge a player going into college. It doesn't mean what kind of quality player he's going to be when he gets there. And it's all about the program that he's going into. And it's all about, it starts with Ryan Day in the weight room, right? Starting to develop guys' strength, muscle, quickness, speed. It starts there. And then they start to build football smarts, and then they start to get reps and whatnot. And I mean, to judge, I guess players and development and stuff like that, you kind of have to look at guys, the extreme cases like Nicky Manwari, who got here and just dominated, and also to development of guys such as, a Mo Kaba or a Boogie Huntley or a Tonka Hemingway, who have been here and who have just basically started from the bottom and then developed up. Those guys weren't super highly touted coming out of high school. It's all about the program that is built around it, and it's all about how that program and system can develop guys. And I guess that's what I was trying to get at earlier. The stars, it only means the quality of player they are coming out of high school. It doesn't mean anything once they get to campus. There's a lot of external factors, as we've seen, especially with South Carolina. There's a lot of external factors that can happen once you get on campus and adjust to it and whatnot. So, I mean, the ranking and the star rating it doesn't really mean anything once, you kind of put your hand on the line and start digging into fall camp, spring camp, fall camp, summer camp even, So I don't want to say the ratings don't matter. Obviously, to an extent they do, but eventually it just kind of becomes numbers and you see what kind of type of ball player you get. And obviously a lot of the guys that are succeeding in the NFL were not very highly touted recruits coming out of high school. It's very rare that you see a guy that, is 5-star superstar coming out of high school, be that guy in college and then move on to the NFL and be that, all that and more. So It's very rare when that happens. So I'm not trying to discredit On3 or anything like that. And I think, shout
No,
out
I
to
mean, but it's the truth. And like,
yeah.
look, sites like On3, like we work at, and the other recruiting services out there. I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome to be able to have these star systems because they do mean something. They do mean
Yeah.
something. But once you arrive at a campus, that all goes out the window. It's nice. It's a nice talking point. I mean, how many times have we talked about how South Carolina is over the 50% mark for blue chip players for the class of 2023? That hadn't happened in about a decade or so. So I bring those things up because I think you're on to something, intern Joe, and it's not a shot at our company whatsoever. It's
Yeah.
it's just the reality of it. It's a fun talking point. It's a fun talking point.
Yeah. And I mean, it's fun to look at guys like, Josh Allen and even a Ja Morant if we want to go into basketball, right? Ja Morant wasn't a 5-star kid coming out of high school. Josh Allen wasn't a 5-star. Neither was Pat Mahomes, really. Like, I mean, it's really fun to kind of look at that and be like, oh, these are the guys that got passed over and whatnot. And granted, we saw what kind of person they were in college. Those, I mean, the Allens and the Mahomes and whatever. But yeah, I mean, once you're, the legs hit the rubber and, you start going at, some of the big boys in the SEC, you really find out who you are pretty quickly. And again, when you see guys develop like a Nicky Minwari that quickly, and, there's the short-term development and then there's the long-term development, right? You see guys that are kind of late bloomers and whatnot, but I think it just speaks to the program when you can have guys that come in as recruits and then develop into talent as they go along, right? I think that's the whole name of the game here, right? With the transfer portal and all that, you want to be able, like, that's the reason why, recruiting is still as big as it is, because you still want to bring in guys and still develop and stuff like that. Because, I mean, teams can rely on the transfer portal to fill out a roster, sure, but I mean, you're not going to get any consistent development there. And that's why recruiting is still a big thing, because I mean, people were worried the transfer portal would have been free agency, but, in that recruiting wouldn't mean as much. But I think, when you look at the development side of things, if I'm speaking sense here, you see guys develop. That's why recruiting still makes a big deal, because you get guys, the diamonds in the roughs that you can develop. You kind of get them going, and you really start to get them developing and make them into the football player that, they always want to be. And you also test the guy's character too, because college, I mean, you take these young kids and kind of, let them be adults and stuff like that and whatnot. So you test their character with that aspect too, managing themselves and being in the program and all of that stuff, Mike. We could talk about it forever, but you're right. It is a really interesting topic to talk about. And again, we could talk about it forever. All the guys that swung and missed, or that the recruiting sites swung and missed on and stuff like that. It's fun, but talk about it forever.
South Carolina and Alabama men's basketball is set to tip off at CLA. 17.5-point underdogs the Gamecocks are tonight. Still looking for their first SEC home win on the season, taking on the number 2 ranked Alabama Crimson Tide, who beat Georgia by nearly 50 points the other night. So not going to be an easy task by any means. And as we kind of hit on before, again, obviously this isn't necessarily a basketball show, but there's a lot going on with Alabama's program right now. And, I know people are probably going to have some fun at Alabama's expense tonight. I'm already seeing some of the costumes and stuff, but just an awful situation. It doesn't change any of that. It's just a really, really sad situation. Sad for so many people for so many reasons. But again, we'll wait and see how things play out over there, because it's certainly just beginning, unfortunately, over there. I will say this. Let's see if we can get some quality guys next window. SC Scout guy, I think you have to manage the transfer portal in the same way you have always had to be careful with how many JUCO players you would take. Yeah, I mean, the JUCO player route, because look, and I had the opportunity when I was in Mississippi to cover some really talented teams, some really talented JUCO teams. I had a chance to see as well. East Mississippi Community College we know they've kind of been a factory when it comes to producing talent, especially in the SEC. But never mind the fact of the years, right? The years are a little bit different because you go over there, you play for a year, you play for 2 years. Now you're coming to South Carolina and you only have a year or two. And the other thing, too, is I was mentioning this to Mark Kingston the other day. We were talking before his show, Carolina Calls, last week. Believe it or not, that COVID season, I mean, we're almost towards the end of that. So the guys that have had that extra year, right? I mean, we've seen some cases where guys have played 5 years. Some have played 6 even. You know, I know there's even some rare cases. You think that, you know, like a Jordan Strawn situation, you might get like a 7th year. But I bring that up because we're almost towards the end of that. We're almost towards the end. And of course, there'll be guys that have 5th years because they'll redshirt or could be a medical hardship thrown in there. So, yeah, I get it. There'll be some guys that are 5 or 6 years in the future as well. But that point being is a lot of these guys, it's like, oh, we have them for an extra year. Oh, we have. That's starting to go out the window. It's starting to go out. So you have to figure out, okay, how do we manage these rosters? How do we manage some of the turnover? Because some of the turnover wasn't happening as rapidly in comparison to years past. Yes, the portal changed things a little bit. No question about it. But when I say rapidly, I'm talking about the fact that USC essentially had like a whole nother class there. Now, every player took advantage of that extra year? No. But you had to deal with that as well. That's going to be gone. So we'll see how that all kind of plays out. Intern Joe, we will hopefully be talking some dates very soon as to when South Carolina will begin spring football practices. Trying to see if I have it around here. I had a notepad.
Real quick, top Gamecock. Yeah, I mean, we will, I guess towards the end, it's mostly football, but yeah, we'll answer just about anything. Also, too, yeah, I was munching. You caught me. That was kind of funny. A little bit of ham salad.
Trying to see where I put it.
Bite in.
I got all my notes around me. Trying to see where I wrote this one up as I hit the microphone. Smooth. Let's see. It's the project with the studio. So spring break for USC is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Intern Joe, you would know this as a student, March 5th to the 12th, correct?
I'm sorry. Yeah, spring break is the 5th through the 12th. Yeah.
Last year, if we follow the same model, and again, doesn't necessarily mean that it will be, but last year, South Carolina started spring practices on Tuesday, March 14th, 2022. So following that model, I would not be shocked if USC is, what would that put the date at? Whatever that Tuesday would be. I would not be shocked if South Carolina is starting spring practices on, excuse me, I'm losing. The 14th is a Tuesday this year. Last year, whenever that Tuesday was, would that be the 15th, 13th? Bottom line is I would expect spring football to start around then, is what I'm trying to get at. Yeah. The unofficial, because it just hasn't been publicly announced, but it's kind of been like the world's worst kept secret. The spring game, South Carolina has been looking at the 15th, is what we've been told. The Beamer Ball would actually be, I think, actually a couple weeks after that, 2 weeks after to be exact. Tickets are on sale. I would highly recommend people checking that out. It was a lot of fun last year. But I bring those things up just to kind of give you an idea as to how quickly this is going to go. I mean, it's already, we got less than a week to go of February. We're going to be right there in March. And then before you know it, we are going to be through spring football. And then we're going to be talking about this upcoming season. I got one more question, does it look like? And we're going to close it out on this, Intern Joe.
Might as well. Top Gamecock, who is y'all's most important player for the 2023 season? You're not allowed to use Rattler, Wells, or Eamon Worry. My pick would be Marcellus Dial. Who would you pick and why? All you, Mike. Go ahead. Go crazy.
I like Marcellus Dial. That takes one away from me. I'm going to give it to a position that gets overlooked a lot. And I think it's one that for the last couple of years, it was taken for granted because you had a guy there who I've joked around. He was an intern of mine at Watch Fox. That he was, basically with the football team for 9 years. With Eric Douglas moving on, it looks like Nick Gargiulo, the transfer coming in from Yale, will be the starting center. I think that is going to be one of the most important positions this season. Outside of the fact that he touches the ball in every friggin' play, you need a smart center. How quickly can he adapt to the speed, the strength of the SEC, of playing at this level in comparison to playing at Yale? And how quickly can he pick up the playbook? Because he needs to know that. I mean, if you think Rattler needs to know the playbook, he needs to know the playbook inside and out times two. I think he'll be able to do that. He's got obviously a very, very high football IQ, but he also has just a high IQ in general. He was freaking at Yale, for crying out loud. And he was a captain for that team, the only captain, as they do every year. So, and having conversations with Dante Reno about the young man, and I know he's talked about him on this very airwave right here. I think it was actually on signing day a couple weeks back. He is a guy that he expects to get in here, Dante, that is, and he'll be able to pick things up quickly. And if that is the case, we talk about how that offensive line, how you want them to be able to gel quickly. Once you have that center position, right? Once you have that center position locked in, right? He's good to go. And he knows what the hell he's doing. It's going to make everyone else, their job's a hell of a lot easier, right? You got two guys on the left, two guys on the right if you're the center. Once you know what you're doing, it's going to make the guys next to you feel more comfortable. And I think it'll just help that rapport grow quicker. And again, that's what they need. They need to be able to gel quickly.
Yeah. I like that pick. I mean, again, kind of took it from me. I was going to say that, or I think Mo Kaba is my sleeper pick, right?
Like that.
Mo Kaba, because, I mean, we've seen how talented he is. We've seen what he can do. And I mean, same thing, right? With the offensive line, you need a guy in the middle that will do the dirty work, be smart. I think Mo Kaba is the answer on defense. You need a Mike linebacker that knows the field well, that can play well, that knows everybody else's position. Kaba's been there, done that. He's shown that he understands the defense, understands how everyone else can play. So I think it's huge. Sleeper pick for that one, and then obviously I don't think this offense will be punting very much, but another sleeper pick would be Kai Kroger, quarterback of the year. Might need to be in the Heisman conversation yet again. But
I do think too, just adding one more name out there, I would say Stone Blanton. I think Stone's going to be a guy that is going to get a lot of playing time this year.
Yeah.
We saw his snaps go up last year, especially towards the end of the season. And a lot of that was by design. You have a new guy come in, right? He's a freshman, new guy. And he's still trying to figure out what the hell college football is all about, right? So he's doing that, number one. But number two, they were trying to see, okay, are we just going to play him on special teams? Or is he a guy that's going to factor in playing defense for us at some point? Because if he's able to play some defense too, that changes the philosophy as to how you're going to use him. If you're just going to use him on special teams, and I've had this conversation with Pete Lumbo before, if they're just going to use a player on special teams, and again, obviously, right, football, anything can happen, injuries happen, things can change all the time. We know that. But once you know that he won't be playing just special teams, that makes things a hell of a lot easier. Now, if you want to throw him out there for a package, now if you want to see him in the game, you can put him out there. You don't have to worry in the back of your head, oh man, once he hits that 4-game mark, and obviously this past year the NCAA changed that for bowl games, but I'll still call it the number 4. You have a better sense. So what did we see once we knew he was going to be over that mark? Well, he started playing more in defense too. In having that experience, performing the way he did, it only is going to set him up to have a tremendous season in 2023. But again, how is he going to perform this spring? And now you have other guys that are coming in there, right? You got Pup Howard, and I know we talk about inside, outside linebacker. I know it's different, but at the end of the day, a lot of these guys, they have some speed to them, right? They can be interchangeable, just because, again, the game's just different. You're not talking about, even though this guy was an absolute freak of an athlete, you're not talking about like the Dick Butkuses, the Ray Lewis. I'm trying to go back, old school tight end. Linebackers, just big old linebackers that really couldn't move, sideline to sideline. It's different now. It's different. And Stone certainly has the ability to do that if needed. And, Pup can move as well.
Absolutely.
Intern Joe, it's been a pleasure, my friend. Everyone, we appreciate you tuning in tonight. Good numbers tonight. Good numbers for this change up this week on a Wednesday night. It could be the new norm. We will keep you guys posted on that. And the reason being is, well, now that baseball season is here, and I say this because this is one of the rare freaking nights where they actually played on a Wednesday. Because baseball plays on Tuesdays, we feel like, we want to kind of keep that away because it's just different. You have a different audience. Football is going to be one of those things we talk about year round. I get that. But basketball, they weren't always playing on Tuesday night, so it just didn't make sense to move it. There were some Tuesday night games, but it didn't make sense to move it. So that's the reason why, if anyone is curious about that, I posted on the Insider Forum, but I know, some people might not be GC subscribers. If you're not, come on by. It's $29.99 through August 31st. I know that might seem like a lot of money, but I will say this, as someone that was working at Watch Fox, if we weren't breaking it, GC was. And there were days where I was pissed off that I didn't have a subscription to be able to get information. And the longer I've been down here, seeing how important recruiting is to a lot of y'all, it's not like this up north. It's not. Penn State, maybe they care, but it's not going to touch it. But Boston, nothing. So I say that because Wes and Chris are truly two of the best in the game when it comes to this. Working with those guys every freaking day and seeing the job they do from a recruiting standpoint, it is absolutely insane, the information that these guys are able to gather. So that's my little spiel. That's my little pitch. Head on over to Gamecock Central. Take advantage of it because, again, talk about football. We have everything. Women's basketball, they're getting ready for a deep postseason run, right? Knock on wood. Men's basketball, it looks like they're going to be very busy in the transfer portal, according to people close to the program. And then, of course, spring football. It's right around the corner. Oh, and of course, baseball too. And we have some other sports in there, but those are obviously the heavy hitters that you'll see every day. Intern Joe, anything else you want to add, my man?
I'm all good, Mike. Y'all be safe tonight. Watching this basketball game. Hopefully, knocking on wood, keep it kind of close.
We will, as far as the live stream schedule goes, I know that with us, and I don't know if you're talking about us, Top Gamecock. I just mentioned this, but right now we're in the process of trying to figure out when we'll be doing these shows because we've been doing them. Obviously, it's been called GC Live Talking Tuesday nights. We're in the process of deciding if we should keep it on Tuesday or move it to Wednesday. I'd say we're leaning towards Wednesday, but nothing's finalized yet. And the reason being is because, baseball is going to be going on. So, and when spring football gets going, we're going to be a little short-staffed too. So that will help us be able to cover all our bases so that we don't have to keep flipping the schedule. Oh, I can't do it tonight. Oh, we got to do it this night. As far as the other shows go, the Hard Foul is on Sundays. Correct, Intern Joe? What time is that?
Yeah,
is that 7?
Sundays at 7. And then we also are working on a baseball show. TBD. It's announced that we're having it. We're just working on
So we have a
Schedule.
baseball show currently right now, Extra Innings. It is
Yep.
not a live show, though.
I was
Not a
gonna say,
live
yeah.
show. But once I'm assuming once basketball is done, that live show that you're talking will be there.
Yep.
So there's plenty. Bottom line is there's plenty of video
So much fun.
content.
And
This
then Wes and Chris
episode,
are all live for GC Live every day.
yep, GC
West
Live,
Canada.
the Garnet Trust Hour as well on 107.5 The Game. All that stuff. Plus this, if you've missed any of it, whatever the case may be. We also are doing new daily videos called the GC Mail. There's so much freaking video content right now on Gamecock Central. You're not going to find this in a different market, especially for a website. I promise you that. But I bring all that up because if you've missed any of this show or you've missed any of that other stuff I mentioned, head on over to Gamecock Central's YouTube page. Head on over to Gamecock Central's YouTube page. Subscribe there. It's free. Put the little alert bell on. Anytime a new video drops, you can catch it. So if you want to watch this show in its entirety, you want to see our two mugs for an hour plus, have at it. Go there. If not, if you're a podcast guy or gal, head on over to Gamecock Central's podcast platforms. You can listen to it wherever you get your podcasts. And Jimmy F., he said, y'all don't forget to give to one of Carolina NIL. We are part of Garnet Trust, Gamecock Central. A lot of great stuff that Garnet Trust has been doing. Again, I mentioned the GC, the Garnet Trust Hour, Garnet Trust Takeover Hour. I think it was the GC Hour, Garnet Trust Hour. On 107.5 The Game. We're getting some of those student athletes in there. That's great. There's a lot of great things in the pipelines with the Garnet Trust. Very, very excited. Very excited. My first time tuning in. Love the content and interaction. This is Fire. Intern Joe adds some awesome aspects. He is a go. It's good to have Intern Joe.
Appreciate it.
Dude, he's been doing a great job. Keeps getting better and better in front of the camera. Dang. The Temple game is going to overtime. Now I'm going to have to check that out. Our game is on ESPN News now. I got you now. I got you. So that's
shout out. I do want to shout out Colin Taylor. He probably has the tweet of the night so far. Brandon Miller fouled Josh Gray on a dunk. Colin Taylor goes, Josh Gray just slammed home a dunk and Brandon Miller fouled. Caught in the wrong spot at the wrong time there. Very lovely. And then apparently, allegedly, students are chanting guilty as Brandon Miller is at the free throw line. So they're having quite a lot of fun over there at Colonial Life already. As we will go to that. Buddy.
All right, Intern Joe. Appreciate everyone that watched tonight. We appreciate you guys. Again, we will keep you posted as to when this show will come out again. I would say be on the lookout for some type of update over the next couple days. Wednesday could be the move, but once we all get on the same page, we will make that decision official. I'm Mike Yuba. He's Intern Joe. You guys have been watching GC Live Talking Wednesday nights. We'll do it again next week.